Hello and welcome to The Media Leader. What news stories mattered this week in the world of media and advertising? I'm Ella Sagar.
And I'm Jack Benjamin.
Jack, what was the most important news story for you this week?
I think the big story of the week was I was really surprised by Disney's earnings. I know there's a lot of earnings and we're going to talk about other earnings later on, but I was particularly struck by the fact that Disney was getting extremely close to profitability for its direct-to-consumer segment. In fact, I think it was Disney Plus and Hulu combined for the first time ever were in the green as opposed to losing money. And the rest of the segment was technically in the red because ESPN Plus, which Disney also owns, did not do quite as well as those, but also did better than expected and better than last year. So that struck me as actually a really big deal that people should be attuned to.
And I think it all ties in with the streaming wars, doesn't it? And how this is all playing out, all the different strategies of different players launching ad tiers, diversifying their revenue. But with the Disney Plus, that was quite interesting. And Hulu it was quite a reversal of they were operating at a loss the same time last year. It was quite a significant loss. Yeah. And now to almost have reversed those fortunes is, I wonder what was behind that. If more, subscriber gains or taking on, like it has a better average revenue per user, lots of different factors, I guess.
It's a mix. So Disney's core subscribers rose by 6.3 million year on year. And that was ahead of the market expectations. So that was definitely good for the company. But it's also, and prices have also risen for subscriptions. And this is true across the board for a lot of streaming services. But I think part of the issue as well was needing to perhaps cut back on costs and just make the streaming services more efficient. And this is true of not just Disney. We've seen this attempted at Warner Brothers Discovery, where you had a lot of high profile shows, axed, even movies that were basically ending.
Nearly done,
yeah,
right?
Nearly done. Production had wrapped. And those were canned for, because they were basically making the calculation that we can get more in terms of a tax write-off than we think we might be able to earn by promoting it and spending more marketing money and all that stuff. I'm not saying Disney hasn't necessarily done the same type of thing, but it also must be making some cuts as well in order to get in the green. And CEO Bob Iger even has in the past said, like, we need to focus on like creating really high quality things for Disney Plus and also for in cinemas as well. I think he seemed, when he retook the reins last year, he seemed very interested in saying, look, Marvel's maybe we're doing almost too much.
Yeah,
Star Wars, we're doing too much. We need to make sure that it's what we're doing is really high quality, is well promoted, it's not ridiculously over budget, that type of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe the effects of the writer's strike, the actor's strike, that might have leveled out as well. That could be a factor because that, I think, came to an end in September last year. So obviously that would still affect productions going forward and have delayed things.
That's true.
So that's maybe something that could have had some implications there.
It's a good point. We'll mention later that the sort of April box office wasn't particularly strong this year compared to last year. And when I talked to people at Digital Cinema Media, which is the UK's largest cinema advertiser, they basically suggested that, we're still sort of seeing the effect of the writers and actors strikes. And by the sort of Q3, Q4 part of this year, that effect will have basically waned altogether. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point, interesting point for sure.
Yeah, and I think also we saw Rita Ferro speak, who is the VP of Global Advertising at Disney, in December, and she gave a few kind of nuggets of information about, if you want to survive in this streaming market, you have to have multiple revenue streams, otherwise you're going to have to think about consolidation. So I think that's quite interesting and kind of leads us into the next topic that we're going to talk about in terms of consolidation and merging. Paramount Global is pursuing simultaneous talks with Sony Pictures Entertainment, and Apollo Global Management, which is a private equity company, and Skydance. And last week we were talking about Bob Bakish, their former CEO, who's left the business and been replaced by 3 different executives. So what do you think, Jack, of the simultaneous talks? Everything's on the table.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting. There were reports that were, even when there was initially exclusive talks between Skydance and Paramount about a potential merger or sale. And then I saw reports that were before that exclusive window had closed, that Sony Apollo had already like, when it closes, they'll have discussions. To me, that sounds like a bit early, given that they're supposed to be an exclusive. Well, anyway,
yeah,
don't need to nitpick. I think it's interesting. Paramount has a huge amount of debt relative to the amount of cash that it's bringing in. The S&P actually downgraded its debt rating to junk in March. So
doesn't sound like a good rating.
It's not a very good rating. No. So I think there's a number of reasons for why Paramount makes sense for a company looking to that has the capacity to take on that debt. And Paramount still has some very valuable IP. But it'll be interesting to see, if I would be surprised if at this point Skydance and Paramount reach a deal when they had a whole month of exclusive talks and didn't come to a deal. So it'll be interesting to see if they drop out. And it'll be interesting to see how talks between Sony and Apollo continue. I don't know if it's hard to make predictions. You don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you have any further thoughts.
I think from what I've read around it, Shari Redstone, who is the kind of controlling shareholder of Paramount Global, seems to favor the Skydance deal. But I find it interesting, Warner Brothers Discovery at one point in early this year, and I think this was going on in January, and then kind of they pulled out of merger talks in February. So they were sort of in the picture for a while, and Skydance has been around longer than that. I think because Paramount Global and Skydance have made productions together, and that would make sense that they would seem to understand the business and that sort of thing. And then as for Sony Pictures Entertainment and Apollo, it's a bit, I think it's a $26 billion cash offer. And so it might just end up being in a sort of bidding war. And I don't quite know how that will end up, but Paramount Global is more than just its movies and its TV shows. It's got so many different arms to its business. It sold off its publishing arm, for example, last year, which is called Simon & Schuster. So there's so many different parts to the business, which then makes these merger talks so much more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, these companies are themselves results of many, many mergers over years. There's been consolidation within entertainment over time. And now when seeing further consolidation, there's always then these issues of, can you afford it? Is it really worth the asking price? I mean, we've seen other mergers in the past that maybe haven't ended up succeeding so well. I mean, Warner Brothers Discovery is actually one of those where I think a lot of people would say, well, one company had to take on a huge amount of debt for another company, and that's caused concerns for the business that then lead to the cuts that I referenced earlier to content. So, it's challenging, but
and competition concerns as well. If there was going to be another merger, so it becomes some kind of mutant merged company, streaming TV company.
Yeah, but we'll keep an eye on Sony and Apollo. It's always interesting when private equity gets involved as well.
And I'd love to see what their kind of evaluation would be. Moving swiftly on to Reddit's first earnings. It IPO'd this year, and so it has released its first ever earnings. It grew its ad revenue by 39% to $222.7 million in Q1, and there was strong growth for SME advertisers in markets outside the US. And I guess since it's a US started business, then that's quite significant. And it's the fastest pace of growth since mid-2022, apparently. So what stood out for you in those earnings? I've picked out a few bits, but what do you think of its first ever earnings? Positive? I think so. I mean, if you look at the top line, you would see that Reddit posted a 500 million or more than a 500 million quarterly loss. So that doesn't look great, but a lot of that had to do with the IPO. These numbers are good. I'm honestly a little surprised. That's significant growth in advertising. And it does, to be fair, maybe I shouldn't be surprised. I have talked to people at agencies that have said that Reddit is actually quite interesting because the proposition doesn't necessarily overlap so much with a lot of what other social media companies are offering. Some agency folks that I've spoken to have talked about how sort of Meta is the baseline for a lot of social spend. It's like you would start with Meta on a plan, and then what else can be additive? What else is different? How else can you reach people? And I think Reddit might not have a tremendous amount of overlap with different Meta
products. And two, what Reddit offers is different in the sense of it's very community focused, it's very niche focused. So an advertiser wanting to really target a specific community can do so. And I know that Reddit has invested a significant amount of energy and money into communicating best practices for advertisers as they're sort of, it's not a new website, but a lot of the ad opportunities are new and developing. So yeah, you're seeing significant growth. And I think to highlight your highlight of the SMEs and international growth is especially important because the biggest social media companies, as well as a lot of the big, like sort of retail media people, retail media companies like Amazon, make a lot of their money from small and medium sized businesses. So if Reddit can give a good offering for that, then that would probably bode well for them.
And that could be like a self-serve platform that's very more intuitive and provides that kind of dashboard of how what that return on investment is, which would be useful for agencies as well to use, but making it super intuitive. I'll use that word again.
I suppose it's probably just general good business to make it as easy as possible for people to spend money with you.
Yeah, I think with Reddit, what in my head, I've only used it very briefly, and I think it for me was a bit more like the chat rooms, it kind of vibe in terms of the communities or like the tumblers of like finding your niches. And
it's
it didn't have a feed in the same way, and it wasn't it has a feed, but you sort of can customize it more. And there's a bit more. And I wondered how many people might be eschewing X now and maybe moving over to Reddit because it's a better user experience.
Well, their users have picked up. So they did mention that they grew users. I don't know how many of them.
I think it was record user growth.
Right.
And they use daily active users as their metric.
Opposed to monthlies. Yeah, I don't know how much of that can be attributed to people leaving other services as opposed to maybe just spending more time on Reddit. Reddit also was like almost seen for a while, and probably still is among some people, as almost like a search substitute, because a lot of times when you search on Google, you're met with a high degree of ads and things that you maybe didn't want to see, and by adding Reddit to it and going to Reddit, which
it's very useful for DIY, I will say that.
Yeah. There's lots of uses. So yeah, I think it'll be one to watch. The share price I would still expect to remain volatile for the time being, just because it's recent IPO and
that makes sense. Acast reported its Q1 earnings. It is a global podcast platform, for those that don't know. It's announced 23% organic net sales growth, and that was driven by 48% net sales growth in North America, and then 16% in Europe and 20% in the rest of world. So, I think that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I wanted to, you covered this for us. What were some of your key takeaways beyond the top line? Yeah. Why is North America growth so huge?
I think I was so Ross Adams, who's the CEO of Acast, told me that there is improved sentiment from advertisers. And I initially thought, is that specific to podcast advertising? He said, no, I think that's just the sentiment is better. It's more, and that's to do with the macroeconomic factors compared to last year, which was quite tough. And
we're seeing that with a lot of these social media companies as well that have reported upticks in earnings.
Yeah, in terms of spend, in terms of kind of forward planning and long-term plans. And I think the other thing that Acast has been developing is a lot of AI targeting tools. So they have like predictive demographic tools and that sort of thing, which they're trying to make more precise so that you can get that kind of level of targeting they have, I think, several 100,000 podcasts now. Right. And so it's just where do you start with that? But you might be missing out on lots of engaged audiences because you're kind of targeting in the wrong, in a way that isn't like reaching those people. So that's a few other bits as well.
Yeah. Podcast advertising seems really challenging because there are so many podcasts out there. I would imagine most advertisers are probably looking at like, top 50 charts or something, but there's a lot of niche podcasts, maybe like our own, which are read by or listened to by a smaller perhaps degree, but really, really highly interested. A lot of niche podcasts or hobbyist podcasts that seem like it would make a lot of sense to advertise on, but you might have not even heard of. So I imagine AI could be useful in trying to identify which ones might work for your brand.
That you might not have thought of, and that your agency might not be like that household name. And something that I spoke to on a panel at the Future of Audio and Entertainment. What are the untapped areas or the communities that you haven't really spoken to And I think it's something crazy, like more than 50% of the spend goes for the like top 100 podcasts. And then, but there's so many others that don't kind of reach that threshold, but they do have very, very engaged audiences that would, and if you know, it's that whole right time, right place sort of situation as well. But yeah, Acast definitely one to watch, and they're on track for profitability as well. So in a weird way, kind of similar
by the end of the year.
Right, so in terms of full year 2024, and not dissimilar to Disney's streaming business, that fiscal fourth quarter 2024 is going to be a big time for Disney, but also for Acast as well, to see if they hit that. So we're going to go now to a number of one-line stories that we weren't able to discuss in as much detail. Jack, do you want to get started? What were they?
Yeah, there's a number of other stories that we won't have time to talk about, but are definitely important to keep an eye on. So number one, TikTok sued the US government, alleging its recently passed TikTok ban violates constitutional protections for freedom of speech. So another TikTok news that happened in the past week was that it reached a multi-dimensional, quote unquote, licensing agreement with Universal Music Group after a months-long dispute. So Universal Music Group artists are now having their music returned to the
Taylor
platform.
Swift.
Like Taylor Swift. Well, she had a separate thing. I mean, she's doing well this year and last year. Other news, Reach also released its first quarter earnings. Group revenue declined 6.7%, with digital revenue down 8.5% and ad revenue falling 10.7%. Not-for-profit publisher QueerAF also, in the publishing news, launched in the inaugural Trans Plus History Week with a countrywide campaign using donated media from Ocean Outdoor, Open Media, and Metro. So if you see those ads around, that's what that's for.
The Guardian plans to make a small number of voluntary redundancies among its editorial team. In more job cut news, Ocean Outdoor has launched a new premium full motion network at Battersea Power Station. And in more outdoor news, JCDecaux posted double-digit Q1 organic growth, and Comscore has revealed the UK and Ireland box office in April reached £60.6 million, which was down 34% compared to the previous year, which you mentioned earlier, Jack.
That was mostly because last April was very good with the Super Mario Brothers movie, but also this was a bit of a weak slate. According to other people. I'm not a film critic.
What, Kung Fu Panda 4?
That, I haven't seen it, but I've heard good things.
Okay. And that's about all we have time for. Let us know what you think of the format, and send us your questions, comments at news@the-media-leader.com for them to be featured on the show. Until next time, thank you, Jack, for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the Media Leader podcast. If you like what you hear, guess what? You can read our stuff at our website, themedialeader.co.uk, where you can sign up to our daily newsletter in the UK of analysis, opinion and commentary about what's going on in media and advertising. You can also find us on YouTube. We are posting video interviews and clips from our live events. And don't forget to check out our LinkedIn page, which is often a very interesting way to see what people in the industry are saying about our articles and the issues we write about. Anyway, get back to work. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.